I want you to reach up and receive this as your word from the Lord.
On live television in October 2024, a convicted sexual offender revealed startling allegations regarding Pastor T.D. Jakes. Jachi claimed that when Jakes attempted to kiss him in the 1980s, his attorney demanded $6 million in exchange for his silence. Jakes filed a lawsuit, calling it extortion. Things worsened. Jakes passed out during a sermon a few weeks later. He suffered a severe heart attack that almost killed him. According to doctors, it might have been brought on by the scandal stress. He is now leaving behind his $400 million business. Was his heart the only reason for his collapse? On June 9, 1957, Thomas Dexter Jakes was born in South Charleston, West Virginia. African-American families found life particularly challenging during this time due to racial divisions and economic hardships. Ernest Jakes Sr., his father, operated a janitorial company, and Odith, his mother, was a teacher. Thomas was the youngest of their 3 children, raised together. Black families frequently had little money and little chances. Discrimination was an everyday occurrence in the area, and the effects of segregation were still being felt. Thomas learned the importance of endurance and hard effort from his upbringing in this setting. His ministry was eventually built on the principles he gained growing up in a home where making ends meet was never easy. He frequently attributed his empathy and resiliency to those formative years. Thomas was drawn to preaching even as a young child. He was referred to as the Bible boy at school and frequently pretended to preach in front of mock audiences in his bedroom or backyard. Because he spoke with a noticeable lisp that made him the object of ridicule, his resolve was impressive. A lot of people thought he would never be able to preach well. However, Thomas did not allow their skepticism to define him. He never stopped practicing, even utilizing everyday objects as props and studying the preachers he looked up to. Everyone around him could see how passionate he was, and his perseverance gradually transformed a weakness into a strength that would enable him to fulfill his mission. His world drastically changed when he was 10 years old, when kidney failure was discovered in his father. The disease caused a great deal of emotional and financial hardship on the family, and medical care was scarce. In addition to helping out with chores and taking care of his siblings, Thomas and his mother took on the role of major caregivers for his father. On certain days, he had to skip school in order to take care of household duties. Seeing his father's health deteriorate had a profound effect on him. He frequently recalled that period as the time when he realized how fleeting life is and how crucial it is to keep a family together. Thomas's father died in 1973 when he was just 16 years old. The financial and emotional toll of the loss was devastating. To provide for his family, Thomas had been employed at the Union Carbide plant. However, he had to find alternative means of support after his father passed away. While Thomas continued to follow his passion for preaching, he and his older brother did odd jobs, frequently for little compensation. Despite bearing the weight of being a provider at such a young age, he made an effort to inspire hope and faith in small local congregations. He had to mature rapidly due to the responsibility, provided him with a sense of direction that would guide the remainder of his life. At the age of 19, Thomas delivered his first sermon in a formal capacity in 1976. This was a pivotal moment that validated the vocation he had sensed since his early years. He was ordained 3 years later in 1979, which was a significant event that signaled the start of his public ministry. He frequently spoke to small groups of people in humble settings while juggling his ministry and career. Despite their modest origins, they were brimming with willpower, as well as faith. Had previously had to deal with a speech impairment, poverty, and the death of his father. But he wasn't going to let any of it deter him. When he met Sarita Ann Jameson in Beckley, West Virginia in 1981, his personal life took an incredible turn. Born on August 19, 1955, she was working at her church as the Director of Women's and Children's Affairs. It had not been an easy life. She had suffered from emotional and physical abuse in past relationships and had witnessed her brother's murder in front of his own children. Despite this traumatic history, Sarita was profoundly touched by Thomas's impassioned sermons during his visit to her church. There was an instant connection between them. Sarita, who is described as captivated, was aware that she had found someone exceptional. After only 6 months of romance, they were married, starting a relationship that would grow to be essential to one of America's most powerful ministries. From in the beginning, their marriage was everything from simple. Sarita worked as a disc jockey at a Christian radio station at night to help support their young family. Thomas, meanwhile, concentrated on expanding his ministry. Sarita suffered serious damage to her legs and feet in a horrific car accident that happened just 6 months after their wedding. Despite the doctor's doubts that she would ever be able to walk again, Thomas gave her unwavering care and supported her as she gradually recovered. She eventually regained her ability to walk, and their relationship just got closer. As the executive director of women's ministries at the Potter's home, Sarita gradually rose to prominence as a leader in her own right, and eventually getting published as a writer. Their faith, dedication, and mutual sacrifice have supported their marriage for more than 40 years. Thomas established the Temple of Faith Church in Montgomery, West Virginia in 1980 when he was just 23 years old. The congregation began in a tiny storefront setting with just 10 members. Given that many people questioned his ability to succeed, it was a bold move for a young pastor with little money. The early years were difficult financially due to his speech impairment. In order to purchase groceries, he and Sarita occasionally had to gather and return bottles. However, as the group expanded, it moved to Smithers, South Charleston, and Cross Lanes before settling in Dallas. The Potter's House, a megachurch with over 30,000 members, was born there. What started off as a small shop has expanded into one of America's biggest churches. Long days of arduous work were interspersed with Thomas' ministry during those years. To help pay the expenses, he worked at the Union Carbide chemical plant in West Virginia. He was worn out but resolute from his hazardous career handling chemicals used in mining and welding. Thomas and Sarita had to deal with even more difficulties when the plant shuttered in 1982. For $100 a day, he occasionally dug ditches for his brother. When the job was open, the family relied on candles and bottled water from family members during periods when they were without running water or electricity, and they took turns paying their utility bills. Thomas never gave up on his calling in spite of these difficulties. He clung tenaciously to his beliefs and future vision, preaching wherever he could. Despite these obstacles, Thomas continued his schooling. Years before, he had left West Virginia State University to take care of his father, but he was determined to continue his education. In 1985, Friends International Christian University awarded him a Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies. He earned a Master of Arts in Biblical Studies in 1990. He also received a Doctor of Ministry degree in 1995. He led his expanding church, worked odd jobs, and had a family while juggling these degrees through distance learning and correspondence. Because of his unconventional academic path, some detractors questioned the institution's legitimacy and referred to it as a credential mill. In 1982, T.D. was just 25 years old. Jakes was appointed as the pastor of Smithers Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith. West Virginia was a tiny storefront church with 10 members, so few that they could have fit in one automobile. Although it seemed like a typical beginning, Jakes' trip was anything but. He had already faced difficult obstacles. Jakes had worked at the Union Carbide plant to support his family until it closed, leaving him jobless, and his father had died in 1973 following a protracted illness, and encouraging him to enter the ministry full-time. Early years were characterized by financial hardship. He put in a lot of effort to maintain the ministry with his wife Sarita. To help them out, Sarita even got a night shift as a DJ at a Christian radio station. Jakes made a statement right away. He had been known as Bible Boy as a child because he had preached to made-up audiences. The obligation came suddenly, but he had been preaching since 1976. Was authentic. It was no coincidence that the chapel was situated in a town known for its coal mines. Jakes thought that a location that most people ignore had promise. His first conference, Back to the Bible, was conducted in 1983, a year after he was appointed pastor. there were 80 attendees, a significant increase from the initial 10 members. It was an early indication of his capacity to motivate and captivate others in spite of his low means. He also started a radio ministry that year that focused on the Bible. The cost of a 30-minute spot was $45. The church could hardly afford it, but Jakes recognized the influence of the media. No. His messages struck a chord with listeners right away because they were empathetic and wise. He became a local celebrity thanks to the program, which also attracted new members to the congregation. His voice on the radio became a lifeline for many people in isolated coal mining villages. The fact that 80 people attended his conference by the end of 1983 demonstrated how rapidly his influence was growing. The presiding bishop of Greater Emmanuel Churches, Dr. Quandor L. Wilson, ordained Jakes into the episcopal office in 1987 at the age of 30. The ceremony, which took place at Charleston, West Virginia's Civic Center, was a significant turning point. It was uncommon for someone so young to become a bishop. He was able to supervise more than just his local congregation thanks to the title, which led to additional chances and notoriety. His vision and leadership had obviously already had an effect. By 1988, Jakes understood that in order to grow even more, he needed more backing. He became a member of the Higher Ground Always Abounding Assemblies, a Pentecostal organization established in Columbus, Ohio by Bishop Sherman Watkins. That same year, Watkins recognized his potential and took on the roles of father figure and mentor in the ministry. Despite starting off with only 11 members in 1970, the assemblies have gradually expanded. Additionally, its goal of connecting regular people with amazing saviors was exactly what Jake had in mind. As his ministry grew, this relationship provided him both resources and credibility. Jake's church relocated from Smithers to South Charleston, West Virginia, in 1990. His congregation had grown to over 100 members by that point. The number swiftly doubled and then tripled after the transfer, reaching 300. His church became a haven for everyone seeking hope because of his talent for connecting with those who were battling addiction, poverty, and broken families. He moved once more in 1993, this time to the more affluent area of Cross Lanes. For a black preacher at the time, it was a daring decision. But Jake's message transcended social and racial divides. The congregation quickly expanded to over 1,000 members, with a remarkable 40% of them being Caucasian, an unusual occurrence in Pentecostal churches. Jakes entered the television industry that same year. His weekly show, The Potter's Touch, debuted on Trinity Broadcasting Network in 1993. The impact was instantaneous and astounding. Millions of people watched his sermons in less than a year, and his name spread throughout the nation. He moved his ministry and family to Dallas, Texas by 1996 to cope with the excessive expansion. His programs quickly established themselves as a mainstay of religious television, reaching over 100 nations. To reach even more African Americans, he also collaborated with Black Entertainment Television in 1994. These shows were created to meet the community's unique cultural and spiritual requirements, as opposed to repeating his TBN talks. They discussed economic empowerment, overcoming adversity, and self-worth. Millions of people from the U.S., the Caribbean, Africa, and certain areas of Europe tuned in, and the relationship soon made Jakes a household name in African American homes. He established the Manpower Conference in Detroit, Michigan that same year. Thousands of men attended the event, which provided a secure forum for talking about issues like addiction, marriage, and fatherhood. It developed to become one of the nation's most influential men's conventions. Over 150,000 lives had been changed since the event's inception, and by 2011, over 9,000 men were attending a single event in Dallas. Jake established TDJ Enterprises in 1995, broadening his ministry to include digital media, music, film, and publishing. With the sale of more than 20 million copies of his books and the creation of successful movies like Woman, Thou Art Loosed, the business would eventually bring in close to $400 million. Heaven is for Real in 2014, Jumping the Broom in 2011, and in 2004, Jake's vision extended beyond the pulpit, as seen by the company's establishment of Clay Academy, a charter school, and its funding of the $150 million Capella Park real estate development in Dallas. He presented the nationally syndicated show Get Ready from 1995 to 1996. This attracted millions of viewers and was broadcast on both TBN and preaching was interspersed with live call-ins, music, and candid discussions about urgent problems including addiction, domestic abuse, and financial difficulties. Jakes took his most audacious action to date in 1996. In order to establish the Potter's House, he moved to Dallas from West Virginia with 50 church workers and their families. The 34-acre new campus included a 5,000-seat auditorium. More than 2,000 people attended the first service. The reaction was tremendous. Additionally, the church constructed a 191,000-square-foot sanctuary that could accommodate 7,600 people by August 2000. It is noteworthy that the $45 million renovation was completed in under 4 years. The Potter's House was one of the biggest and most significant churches in America by the early 2000s, with over 30,000 members. With satellite campuses in Fort Worth, Frisco, Denver, and Los Angeles, its influence went well beyond Dallas. Up to 70,000 individuals watched services online on any given Sunday, while over 16,000 people attended services in person. With a racial mix and 45% male membership, the congregation was remarkably diversified. That comprised individuals from diverse backgrounds. One of the worst humanitarian disasters in contemporary American history was caused by Hurricane Katrina, which devastated the Gulf Coast in September 2005. Millions of people were left homeless, and over 1,333 people lost their lives. When its levees broke, the city of New Orleans was particularly heavily impacted, with entire neighborhoods being submerged under the floodwaters. Bishop T.D. Jakes emerged as a key voice of hope amid this upheaval. He was in Baker, Louisiana on September 5, 2005, when President George W. Bush officially commended him for encouraging church families to adopt devastated survivors, referred to Jakes as the commander of the armies of compassion. Jakes demonstrated that he was prepared to utilize his power to demand substantive change by pressing the president to take poverty more seriously. Jakes became more than just a preacher at this point. In times of need, he was able to rally volunteers and resources as an advisor with unique access to national power. Jakes performed another significant role on January 20, 2009, just a few years later. In keeping with a 1933 custom, Jakes joined other pastors at a private prayer session at St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., that morning as Barack Obama was ready to take the oath of office as the first African-American president of the United States. Jakes joined Louis Leon, the rector of the church, and Joel Hunter, the evangelical pastor, in praying for the country and the incoming president. His presence at the highest level of government represented the power and acceptance of African-American religious leadership. Rick Warren gave the invocation during the public swearing-in later that day. However, Jakes' early morning prayer was significant in its own right. Jakes' decision to emphasize togetherness and hope, despite criticism of the selection of some of the ceremony's pastors, solidified his status as a national religious leader who can be relied upon for the most important occasions. In addition to being a spiritual leader, Jake had a strong commitment to resolving social and economic issues. He established the nonprofit Metroplex Economic Development Corporation in 1998 with the goal of bridging opportunity gaps for urban neighborhoods. Through the organization of youth mentorship programs and house ownership seminars, the group assisted thousands of families in moving toward financial stability. In the Capella Park neighborhood, Jakes also founded the Clay Academy, a school that offers kids both academic programs and worthwhile extracurricular activities. He had a clear vision. His goal was to end poverty cycles while maintaining his commitment to religious principles. Families that frequently felt ignored were given hope by these initiatives, which also strengthened neighborhoods and produced jobs. Jake simultaneously extended out to the media industry in addition to the church. He collaborated on a syndicated chat show in 2009 with Dr. Phil McGraw, Jay McGraw, and CBS television distribution. The plan was to use daytime TV broad audience and his motivating manner. Despite having strong support, the project was shelved before it could air due to shifting television industry objectives and economic difficulties. For Jakes, it served as a stark reminder of how challenging it is for a pastor to be successful in the entertainment industry. Jakes made another attempt in 2015, unfazed by his level of fame. 4 cities, Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, and Minneapolis, tested the T.D. Jakes talk program, and the results were favorable. It had spread to more than 50 markets nationwide by September 12, 2016. The program featured celebrity interviews, self-help tips, human interest tales, and faith-based encouragement. However, it found it difficult to make an impression in the congested daytime television market, despite having good content. Tegna declared on March 15, 2017, that the show would be canceled after 1 season due to low ratings and few clearances. Nevertheless, Jakes' voice found a home on the Oprah Winfrey Network, where audiences continued to be reached by his motivational message. Jakes never lost sight of his ministry and family, even if his television endeavors demonstrated the difficulties of breaking into new markets. Sarah, Cora, Jermaine, Thomas Jr., and Jamar are the 5 children he and his wife, Sarita, reared. Unlike megachurch families, all 5 got heavily committed in ministry. While their brothers worked in outreach, media, and church operations, Sarah and Cora became well-known preachers and writers. Together, they aided in the expansion of Potter's House into a ministry that now serves over 30,000 people through more than 50 programs, ranging from literacy instruction to outreach to the homeless and international humanitarian efforts. The Jakes family's resolve demonstrated how unity, faith, and fortitude can preserve a legacy for many generations. Pastor T.D. Jakes was connected to a federal lawsuit against music billionaire Sean Diddy Combs in the beginning of 2024. Producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones filed the case, alleging Combs was involved in sex trafficking, drug use, and sexual harassment. Jakes' name was mentioned in the filing once, but he was not a defendant. Jones asserted that following Cassie Ventura's accusations of rape and abuse, Combs sought to improve his public image through his relationship with Jake. Just that one mention was sufficient to generate online discussion, queries, and headlines. Although Jakes was never charged with any wrongdoing, the relationship demonstrated how even a minor connection may lead to a significant scandal, could present a public figure with actual difficulties. Jakes was embroiled in even more significant controversy later that year. Pennsylvania clergyman and convicted sex offender Dwayne Youngblood made an appearance on the YouTube chat show Larry Reed Live in October 2024. He said that when he was 18 or 19 years old in the 1980s, Jakes tried to kiss him and embraced him against his will. Youngblood had previously been found guilty of child sex abuse in 2008 and child sex corruption in 2014. Jakes received a letter from his lawyer requesting $6 million to prevent a lawsuit around the same time as the interview. Jakes' legal team vehemently refuted the accusations, claiming that they were the result of a campaign of deception and citing Youngblood's criminal history as proof of his untrustworthiness. Online, the allegations immediately attracted attention, with many people doubting Youngblood's intention. And Jakes took a risk on November 25th. He sued Youngblood and unidentified others in federal court for slander. According to the lawsuit, they planned a deliberate attempt to harm his name and demand millions of dollars from him. Jakes' attorneys contended that the accusations had severely damaged his physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, even resulting in a health crisis during his sermon. According to the petition, the charges were wholly untrue and the result of avarice seeking to capitalize on Jakes' reputation and power. Jakes saw the case as a means of retaliation and defense of his ministry and reputation. On November 24, 2024, Jakes had experienced a severe health scare just 1 day prior. The 67-year-old abruptly started to shake and lowered his microphone while preaching at the Potter's House in Dallas. As churchgoers and staff hurried to his aid, he sagged on his stool. The footage of the live-streamed service swiftly went viral, capturing the turmoil and urgency of the situation. It was a big heart attack that was initially reported as a health issue. When Jake got at the hospital, doctors informed him that he was only 5 minutes away from death. He would not have lived if he had been delayed. According to medical examinations, Jakes had been preaching when barely half of his heart was working. The blood supply to the right side had been totally cut off due to a blockage. Until he sat down, the adrenaline of preaching had obscured the seriousness of his situation. He then clarified that it became evident that his body was shutting down the instant he lowered his microphone. According to medical professionals, if treatment is delayed, this kind of blockage frequently results in death. Jakes claimed that he was oblivious to the mayhem around him as he fell, feeling as though he had drifted into a serene, white, cloud-like realm. He characterized it as a serene near-death encounter that altered his outlook on faith and life. The lack of typical symptoms added to the episode's unsettling nature. He never experienced numbness or a strong ache in his chest. Rather, he simply had the impression that he was falling asleep. In retrospect, he referred to it as a quiet heart attack, which came very close to taking his life without any prior warning. Jake's next significant choice was influenced by the near miss. He declared a major shift in front of tens of thousands of people at the Potter's home on April 27, 2025. Later that year, he announced that Sarah Jake Roberts, his daughter, and her husband, Teray Roberts, would take over as senior pastors. Since its founding in 1996, Jake's church has amassed over 30,000 members and a sizable online following. After his health concern, Jakes clarified he could not afford to leave his church without a leader in case he passed away. As chairman of the board, he pledged to continue preaching and leading the church, calling the event a rebirth rather than a departure, as well as a spiritual supervisor. Jake stated unequivocally that he was not leaving the ministry. He promised to broaden his audience by taking on new endeavors, such as the My Next Chapter podcast series that he will be doing with iHeart Podcasts. He clarified that his objective was to continue changing people's lives all across the world while making sure his church remained resilient under new leadership. This is an expansion, not an end, he informed his church.